Do you ever wonder why some people are drowning in debt while others seem to prosper, yet both claim to be blessed? Most of us think lots of money is a sign of success. But what if I told you that blessing can become a curse? That you can have God's favor yet still be stuck in economic bondage? That your paycheck might be feeding the wrong kingdom? In this video, we're going to flip the script on what it means to live under God's economic agenda. Not prosperity cliches, not poverty gospel, but the raw, biblical truth of kingdom economics. A divine framework where justice, freedom, and fruitfulness aren't just ideals, they're instructions. So stick around, because by the end of this teaching, you'll understand why your money might be working against you, how debt can be a spiritual prison, and what it really means to steward wealth in a way that transforms families, communities, and nations. This isn't just about money, it's about breaking free. Let's get into it. Most of us have been taught to pray for God's blessing, to hustle, to believe, to sow. And yes, we've seen some results. Jobs, promotions, breakthroughs. But here's the hard truth. Some of us are blessed and still broke. We have favor, but we're still in financial chains. Why? Because God's blessing is not just for you. It's meant to flow through you. The Bible says, the Lord your God will bless you, so that you will be a blessing. All the families of the earth shall be blessed through you, in Genesis 12. So let me ask you, has the blessing of God on your life become a blessing to others? If not, you might be living by the world's economic system and not the kingdom's. Zing zing. The warning no one preaches. God's blessing can turn into a curse if it only feeds you. Some of us are in an economic prison because we've embraced mammon while rejecting stewardship. And mammon is a ruthless master. Debt, constant anxiety, broken families, compromised integrity. We call it favor, but it's bondage dressed in Sunday clothes. But the kingdom perspective is different. God has a divine perspective on economics. And when we return to it, it doesn't just change our wallets, it transforms our communities. God's economic system is not socialism, it's not capitalism, it's kingdom. It calls for justice, creativity, and freedom, not exploitation. When civil government functions under God's economic agenda, it protects free and just exchange. That means no bribes, no exploitation, no dishonest gain. Instead, it promotes righteous productivity. Let's talk about the power of righteous enterprise. When God's economic principles are implemented, people are empowered to use their God-given creativity, initiative and innovation are celebrated, resources are stewarded, not squandered, and get this, even the poor and oppressed are lifted, because kingdom economics doesn't write anyone off. It empowers everyone to fulfill their potential. Real blessing empowers, it doesn't enslave. This is a call to shift your mindset from consumer to steward, from recipient to distributor. So what now? If you want to walk in true kingdom economics, eliminate dishonest gain from your life and business. Use your resources to serve, not just to survive. See money as a tool and not a trophy. Because in God's economy, the greatest return isn't interest, it's impact. You might have heard about this guy who stole some cash and got nabbed by the law. Problem was, he didn't have the money on him. So the officers asked, where did you hide it? Only he spoke a different language. So they bring in an interpreter. The lead cop says, ask him where he hid the money. The interpreter turns to the thief and asks. The thief just shrugs. He isn't telling anything, comes the reply. Now the officers got annoyed. Tell him we want to know where that money is. They backed at him. And we want to know now. The interpreter relays it. Again, he's not telling you. The head officer decides to up the ante. Tell him if he doesn't talk, we'll shoot him. The interpreter warns the thief, and suddenly the thief spills every detail of where he stashed the loot. The cops lean in. So what did he say? He said he isn't going to tell you anything. The interpreter replies. It's funny how our motives and our interpretations can get tangled up around money, isn't it? Here's the thing. Money matters in God's kingdom plan. And if we're going to talk about government, politics, or the kingdom, we can't ignore the economics of the kingdom. So stay tuned. Later in this session, we'll unpack how God's finances work for us. I hope you are catching on that nothing falls outside of God's kingdom. You see, money matters too. Economic issues are just as vital to your kingdom work as prayer or outreach. There's no split between faith and finances. In God we trust is more than just a phrase. God gave us a job to care for His world and use its resources for everyone's good. He set it up with plenty of freedom and a few rules and firm consequences for breaking them. So when government makes economic policy, it should lean toward free markets, light regulations, incentives for responsible productivity, and yes, real penalties for economic crimes. Think of civil government as God's helper. It's empowered to spur economic growth because it serves people well. That mission ties right back to God's first instructions: fill the earth and make it productive. So what does it look like when politicians and governments run on a kingdom agenda? At the heart of it is this: God's plan gives us both the authority and the responsibility to use the world's resources wisely and profitably, all while honoring moral standards. So in other words, leaders should enable us to prosper as honest stewards of God's creation. And later in this session, we'll dig into practical steps civil authorities can take to align policy with God's blueprint for righteous, flourishing economies. I want to lay a foundation by diving into a key passage on money and wealth. In Deuteronomy Chapter 8, Moses speaks to the Israelites just before they step into Canaan. He reminds them of God's kindness from the moment they left Egypt all the way through their nearly 40 years of wilderness wanderings. And he warns them against ever forgetting who provided every blessing for them. So let's pick up from this in Deuteronomy 8 from verse 11. Moses was worried that once the Israelites moved into the suburbs of Canaan and started enjoying the good life, pride would sneak in. They'd forget that they'd ever been slaves, and they'd forget that every blessing came from God. So Moses lays down a foundational principle of divine economics: don't lose sight of God in your finances. He tells them, otherwise, you might say in your heart, my power and the strength of my hand hath made this wealth. But you shall remember the Lord your God, for it is He who gives you the power to make wealth. Deuteronomy 8, Jagir. So here's the takeaway. Any talk about money that leaves God out is incomplete. He's the author of every paycheck, every thriving business, every nation's resources. As the psalmist declares, the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof. Communism says the state owns everything. Capitalism says the individual owns everything. Kingdom economics says God owns everything, and he entrusts it to us to manage wisely as His stewards. The Bible is crystal clear that private property is owned by individuals, not government coffers. This principle pushes back against socialist and communist models that aim to abolish personal ownership, redistribute assets, and put the state in charge of the economy. That's why Scripture prescribes punishment for theft and mandates restitution for any damage to another's property. Here's the heart of it. God reminds us in Psalms 50 that everything belongs to Him. Wild animals, livestock, even the cattle on 1,000 hills. He says every beast of the forest is mine. If I were hungry, I would not tell you, for the world is mine and all it contains. That means every resource, every blessing, every asset we have is on loan from the Creator. We are not the ultimate owners, we are caretakers. Our job is to manage what God entrusts to us, responsibly, lovingly, and with an eye on His purposes. Later on in this live session tonight, we'll explore practical ways to live out this stewardship, on how to honor God with our budgets, investments, and daily decisions. Remember, it's not just money, it's a matter of heart and faithfulness. And Haggai reminds us of this too. Silver is mine and the gold is mine, declares the Lord of hosts. So that makes it clear, economics isn't some separate secular realm. Everything belongs to God, from the tiniest coin to the richest mine. He sets the rules for both poverty and plenty. So whenever we talk politics or policy, whether we're balancing our household budget or shaping national economics, we've got to start with God's perspective. Like the Israelites, every blessing we enjoy rooted in His goodness. So since God is both the origin and goal of every financial conversation, our task is to discover His kingdom agenda for the resources He has entrusted to us. And here's the big question: what is God's purpose for wealth? Moses answers it at the close of Deuteronomy 8:18. God gives us the power to gain wealth, that He may confirm His covenant which He swore to your fathers, as it is this day. In other words, our prosperity has a higher purpose. It points back to God's faithful promise. So later on in this session tonight, we'll unpack what that looks like in our own lives and in our nation. So allow me to take this moment to thank you all for joining today's stream. If you're enjoying the content and want to support the channel, here are a few cool ways to do it. First up, if you see something you really like, use the super thanks feature right below this video. It's a great way to highlight your comments, and it really supports the channel. Also, keep up the energy in the chat, engage with us, ask us questions, and share your thoughts. I love seeing your comments, and it makes our live streams so much more exciting. And if you're feeling super generous, check out the donation button. Every bit helps, and it goes right back into creating content that you enjoy. Plus, there are some cool perks and shout outs for donors. So don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe if you haven't already. And turn your notifications so you don't miss any of our future streams. Your support means the world to us, and it's what keeps this channel growing and improving. So thank you so much for being here tonight and for all of your support. So let's get back to all the fun. While we're at that, let me put my phone on silent because we are live and I'm getting some notifications which are interrupting me. My apologies for that. I hope we're all excited that tonight we are live after such a long time. I'm not seeing too many comments. Share the stream, guys. Tell people that we are online, we are live. It's not an upload. Yeah. But anyway, let's get to the heart of it. God gives us wealth so it can advance His purposes, like keeping His promises. Remember the covenant God made with Abraham. He promised all the families of the earth will be blessed. So through Jesus, we enter a new covenant. Our gifts, our talents, the opportunities we seize, they all serve to confirm God's promise. If you miss that covenant, you miss why wealth matters. True confirmation happens when your resources become a blessing to someone else. As Jesus reminded us, it is more blessed to give than it is to receive. So think about it. Your car, your home, your wardrobe, those are just possessions, unless they flow outward. If you can't show ways you've used your blessings to help others, then there's no covenant to confirm and no reason for God to entrust you with more. Pursuing wealth apart from Him leads to a heavy price. That's why governments should encourage generosity. So every act of giving points back to God's bigger plan. And later on tonight, we'll explore practical ways public policy can reward charity and stewardship reflecting God's heart in the marketplace. But here is the bottom line. Since God owns every penny on earth, He gets to set the rules. Who receives it and how it is used. So in 1 Samuel, God Himself declares that He makes some people wealthy and others poor. It's like He's saying, follow my guidelines and you'll see my blessings. Follow your own way and you'll face your own outcomes. So back in Deuteronomy 8:12, God told Israel, if you obey my commands, you won't borrow, you'll lend. You'll be the lender, not the borrower. When you handle God's money God's way, debt shrinks instead of growing. Imagine that. No looming fiscal cliff, no endless debt spiral. If we run our businesses, budgets, and national finance according to His blueprint, tackling corporate greed, rewarding honest productivity, we wouldn't be staring at ever-mounting bills. We'd be walking in God's prosperity principles. I think I should have worn my top. For some reason, it's cold here in the office tonight. I don't know why I took off my jacket. Maybe because I'm working alone tonight. That's why I've got this remote, just to manage the live stream. I hope it's still live and there are no funny things happening? Talk to me there in the comments. Oh, this thing's still making noise. My apologies. Oh, my apologies. I'm just managing the thing here. So here's something to get straight. God isn't opposed to wealth. When he decides to bless a person, a family, a church, or even a nation that's aligned with kingdom economic principles, there's no reason for unnecessary guilt. After all, it's his gift. What really matters to him is how you acquire your resources and what you do with them, not the size of a bank account. If your riches come by dishonest means, guilt is appropriate. But if you've earned everything above board, God doesn't heap shame on you. Even so, as soon as God lays down clear guidelines for handling his blessings, our sinful nature kicks in. We twist his rules, invent our own, and invariably wind up worse off than before. Think back to Adam and Eve in the garden. They questioned God's ownership of the garden's take. They decided they knew better and set up shop apart from his economy. The result, they lost far more than they ever gained. So tonight, we look at some practical steps to stay within God's economic blueprint so that we actually benefit from freedom, not fallout. Ever since Eden, people have suffered financial curses because they refuse to steward God's resources his way. Think about it. Families drowning in debt, churches chasing unbiblical fundraising schemes, even our nation teetering on economic collapse, all because we've asked government to do more than God intended. The real problem isn't the shortage of raw materials. God packed this planet with more resources than we could ever imagine. From day one, Adam was called to cultivate the earth under God's direction, for God's glory and humanity's good. Our failure to manage those gifts springs from sin, not scarcity. So biblical economics goes beyond dollars and cents. It's a matter of sin and righteousness. When we treat money as merely material, we miss the solutions God has laid out in his inerrant word. So stay with me. Next, we'll explore how to realign our finances with God's kingdom agenda so we can break free from debt and live in true abundance. Here's the bedrock. Economics springs from theology. Government shouldn't overtake the roles God has given to you, your family or your church. Imagine if on every level, personal, familial, congregational, national, we turn back to God, we'd feel real, healthy economic growth where it's needed most. Instead, we've thrown out his rule book and paid dearly for following our own. Because of sin, the world's economy bears a curse. True restoration awaits until Jesus returns and establishes his reign. But right now, God still invites us to responsibly tap into the earth's bounty. He wants our work, our inventions, farms, factories to enrich lives, boost well-being, and increase productivity. That's kingdom economics in action. So if God laid the groundwork for kingdom economics, why don't we see it play out in our towns and in government policy? Hey, I'm stuttering. So what's blocking his agenda? There are a few obstacles, starting with greed. Greed is an all-out hunger for stuff just for its own sake. It puts things above spirit, so we miss the real purpose of life. So economically, greed warps every system. Remember the 2008 crash? It wasn't some cosmic accident. Flawed federal policy loosened lending rules in the US. Greedy banks pushed subprime loans. Greedy buyers snapped them up, far beyond what they could pay back. That toxic mix of lender greed and buyer greed shattered the housing market. Bottom line, greed is a craving for money and its perks, no matter who gets hurt. And until we root it out, kingdom economics will stay out of reach. So let's clear something up before moving on. Greed and self-interest aren't the same. Greed hoards for its own sake. Self-interest simply looks out for you, so long as you don't forget others. So Paul puts it well in Philippians 2:4. He says, don't just look out for your own interest, Verse 2, as a paraphrase. So, wanting a better job or a nicer car, it's not automatically greedy. It all comes down to motive. If your goal is legitimate, say earning enough to care for your family, there's nothing wrong with that. But if your only aim is more, then something is off. Think about the lottery. Imagine a $10 million jackpot. Should you buy a ticket? You ask yourself, do I have God-given purpose that requires 10 million? If the answer is no, then chasing that payday is just chasing money. It's greed, pure and simple. And it's no better for a government to exploit that need, raising revenue through state-run lotteries instead of incentivizing honest productivity and fair taxation. Proverbs drive this home for us. It says, the plans of the diligent lead surely to abundance, but everyone who is hasty comes only to poverty. That's Proverbs 21. It also says, a stingy man hastens after riches and does not know that poverty will come upon him. That's Proverbs 28. It also says, rather than praying for a windfall, the wise prayer is this: keep deception and lies from me, give me neither poverty nor riches, feed me with the food that is my portion. That is Proverbs 30. So too much or too little, both spark trouble. It either leads to greed, pride, or theft. It's not just people who get greedy. Governments do too. So guys, you'll forgive me. Today I'm not displaying verses. I'm only using one camera. I just wanted to make sure that this live stream goes as planned. So I'm just paraphrasing here and there. And there are no verses on the screen, no graphics, nothing like that. We just want to make sure that we start the stream on time. And yeah, we had some challenges a bit earlier, but we are here now. So yeah, we're gonna improve our game, strongly so. I think we've been at it for almost 30 minutes now. Let's go. So, when officials overprint money or inflate credit to chase short-term gains, they step outside God's economic plan. The result, currency loses value, prices soar, and honest families suffer. That's why God takes fair scales and honest weights seriously. In fact, in Proverbs, it says, a false balance is an abomination to the Lord. So tonight, we look at how healthy self-interest fuels stewardship and how policymakers can craft laws that reward diligence, generosity, and true kingdom-centered growth. So, pardon me, let's talk about another barrier to kingdom economics. It's envy. It's more than simple jealousy. Jealousy thinks, I wish I had what you have. Envy takes it a step further. If I can't have it, I'll make sure you don't get it either. Or at least rob you of the joy it brings. Envy kicks off a chain reaction of sin, undermining someone's right to enjoy their blessing. The Bible doesn't mince words. Paul lists envy among the marks of the wicked. And he warns us that envy has no place in God's people. That's all in Romans. So at its core, envy is a spiritual issue. It reveals a warped image of God. So when we envy, we're basically saying God isn't in control or he isn't good because he gave that thing to them and not to me. In other words, we doubt God's fairness and his sovereignty. But here's the good news. Recognizing envy for what it is, an attack on God's character. Let's choose gratitude instead. So tonight we'll explore how to cultivate thankfulness and celebrate others' success so that envy can't sabotage God's economic blessing in our lives. So let's tackle another roadblock to kingdom economics. This is laziness. I promise you 5 things. So the Bible is clear. Some folks struggle financially simply because they won't work. If you want to prosper, you've got to roll up your sleeves and get to work. No hustle, no harvest. Plain and simple. You can check Proverbs 10, Proverbs 12, and Proverbs 13. Plain and simple. So Paul didn't mince words either. He said, if anyone isn't willing to work, let him not eat. Thessalonians 3. So that means taking responsibility today for tomorrow's needs. When able-bodied people live off handouts without giving anything back, we're actually feeding the problem, hurting them and ourselves. That's why welfare systems need a work component. If you can work, you should work. And it's not just individuals. We shouldn't prop up businesses with government subsidies that reward laziness. So corporate welfare that hands out cash for doing nothing undermines productivity and stunts real growth. So in short, kingdom economics demands effort, personal effort, and policy that rewards honest work. So tonight, we have to look at the structure. How can I put it? Look at how to structure help so that it builds people up instead of holding them back. Because here are my thoughts. The problem with these social incentives, they are good. Don't get me wrong, they are good. But if I'm not mistaken, currently, we have more people on social welfare than on the tax roll. So meaning the minority is paying for the majority. Our kingdom, not even our kingdom, our country is on a downward trajectory. We can't be having so many people on welfare and so many people and so few people contributing to the fiscus of the country. It just does not work. So an inflated welfare state actually fuels laziness, and that's not what God designed. The primary role for caring for the needy belongs to families, churches, and the private sector, not government. When the state steps in as the main provider, it weakens those local support systems and expands its own power illegitimately. And that unchecked growth leads straight to tyranny, runaway deficits, unsustainable debt, and crashing taxes. So instead, government should act as a safety net, stepping in only for able-bodied citizens in genuine need due to illness, disaster, or lack of local resources. By doing so, it champions real compassion while preserving God's order. Families, churches, and communities as first responders, with the state backstopping them when crises strike. So I really want us to explore how policy can balance this safety net with incentives that strengthen families and faith communities, so we build sustainable, kingdom-centered economy. So let's tackle another obstacle: extortion and corruption. Scripture repeatedly exposes the evil of leaders and systems that squeeze people into poverty and deny them a chance to prosper. It's on civil authorities to hunt down and uproot those injustices so everyone can work, thrive, and break free from need. Think back to Nehemiah chapter 5. The returned exiles cried out to Nehemiah because some of their own leaders were jacking up interest rates, seizing homes, and undermining families. They weren't just breaking laws, they were betraying God's heart for justice and mercy. When governments tolerate or even enable that kind of economic abuse, they trap whole communities in cycles of debt and despair. But when leaders step in to stop extortion, to enforce honest practices and restore victims, they unlock productivity and hope. So tonight I want us to explore Nehemiah's response, how those same principles can guide modern policy to stamp out corruption and secure real economic freedom for all. Now let's turn to Nehemiah chapter 5. Some of those people were not simply poor, they couldn't afford basic food. That's verse 2. Others had to mortgage their land just so they could eat. That is verse 3. Others were there just borrowing to pay their taxes. Imagine borrowing money just to pay tax. Not even for food. Borrowing money for another debt. I think that is around verse 4. But the worst part, some of God's own people were being sold into slavery to settle their debts, leaving no inheritance for their children. When Nehemiah heard this, he was livid. He discovered that the nobles and rulers, those very government officials, were extorting their fellow Jews. They abused their authority, charging sky-high interest just so people could survive. You see, that's not kingdom economics. I want us to see how Nehemiah confronted this injustice and what modern leaders can learn from this example to protect their communities from economic abuse. Here's the thing. The system was rigged, so only those at the top got rich. Everyone else got the scraps. Or worse, they had to sell their kids into slavery just to cover a loan. That's economic injustice at its worst. God calls it evil because he hates crooked systems that steal from honest work. So, Nehemiah didn't sit back and watch it happen. He rallied the people into a great assembly and called out the spiritual rot behind the greed and set up a plan to return what was stolen. With everything happening in South Africa, we need this message more than ever. So, just like that, justice was restored. Debts were wiped away in a single day. God's heart is the same today. He stands against any structure that traps people in poverty. In fact, James warns us about bosses who don't pay their workers their fair wages because they care about profit only. In our time, leaders must do what Nehemiah did: expose injustice, call people to repentance, and build systems that let everyone share in the fruit of honest labor. That's the foundation of kingdom economics in action. So economic injustice isn't just about corrupt individuals. It can be baked right into a nation's laws, so nobody ever fully enjoys the fruit of their work. Take communism and socialism. They tell citizens, you work for the state, and the state decides what you keep. That setup inevitably chokes freedom because it cuts God's rightful place. It cuts it out. It muzzles the church and sidelines faith altogether. But it doesn't stop there. Even in free markets, when greedy monopolies form, workers get underpaid and exploited, and that's just another form of systemic injustice. So true kingdom economics champions both liberty and responsibility, giving people the freedom to create while ensuring fair wages, honest competition, and steady stewardship under God's rule. So I really want us to look at how to build policies that reflect this balance. Now let's talk about one more blocker: unjust taxation. Remember, it's 5 things. Unjust taxation. When a government, whether domestic, socialist, or otherwise, overburdens its people with excessive taxes, it's effectively stealing by law. Remember when Israel asked for a king? Samuel warned them bluntly, if you want a king, he'll take the best of your fields, your vineyards and olive groves. He'll draft your sons for his armies and tax you heavily. That's 1 Samuel 8. That state-sanctioned extortion, far beyond what God himself ever asked. So God set the tithe, the 10%, as our baseline offering to him. And then any ruler who demands more than that crosses a line. You see, heavy taxation signals divine judgment and shows that we've pushed God aside, trying to replace his gracious provision with our own human demands. So tonight I want us to explore how balanced tax policy can honor God's design, ensuring governments fund their work without crushing the very people that they exist to serve. Now here's something we often overlook. It's downright wrong for any government to raid a family's inheritance or slap taxes on property they already own. Now I don't like that. In many places, including right here, inheritance taxes eat away at what parents have worked a lifetime to build. How did we get here? Honestly, how did we get here? I mean, taxing an inheritance. That inheritance, your parents or grandparents were working on it. And when they were working, they were still paying tax and they were saving some as an inheritance. They already paid the tax. Now, when you get the money, you must still pay tax. Nonsense. How really did we get here? So, we asked government to handle things it was never meant to handle. Charity, healthcare, education. And then we complained about the bill. You see, when you centralize services under big government, costs skyrocket. That money has to come from somewhere. So taxes climb higher and higher. Now the Bible actually champions the free market, precisely because rulers aren't allowed to seize private property. Governments exist to protect our freedom, not to micromanage every aspect of our lives. And there's a spiritual side to all of this. Remember tithing. God asked for 10%. But when you've robbed him of his rightful share, he often lets government step in, and before you know it, nearly 40% of your income vanishes in taxes. Yeah, that's just another one, eh? I just opened a can of worms, and I can't take it back because it's live. So now, I'm not saying taxes are inherently evil. Governments need revenue to do the work God has given them, to uphold justice, protect the vulnerable, maintain order, etc. But here's a big difference between fair taxation and progressive rates based on arbitrary thresholds. The higher your rate climbs, the less freedom you've got. Businesses hesitate to invest. Job creation stalls. People become dependent on a system that keeps taking but never gives back. When government overreaches, performing functions God never assigned to it, it ends up spiritually bankrupt, and so does the economy. Deficits balloon, debt spirals out of control. So I want us to look at how to encourage government to stick to its divinely ordained role, so families keep more of what they earn, businesses thrive, and real opportunity flourishes under God's design. So here's a better way to think about taxes. Like a flat fee, everyone pays the same percentage. That means if you earn more, you still pay more in total. But it's fair because the rate is equal for all. That's how tithe works. So think of it like our tithe, 10% for God. And out of what remains, you pay your share. Honestly, this thing of tax brackets, I really don't get it. I don't get it. Yeah, when you're earning a little, you think, yeah, tax the rich up until you start earning money, and you see how unfair it is. I mean, imagine if government took the church's approach, 10%. We're all paying 10%. Now, the person with 100,000 is 10,000. The person with 10,000 is just 1,000. Yeah, let's not start that argument. Let's not start it. Yeah, but imagine this twist, man. If you give 10% of your income to help others, the government only takes the other 9%, 90%. That nudges us to be generous, to meet needs through churches, charities, and neighbors, not just through red tape. And what about taxes beyond income? Keep them on what you buy, not on what you already own. No more property grab or surprise inheritance fees. Let's base extra revenue on consumption, on the things we choose to spend on. A flat tax, simple, objective, rooted in scripture. It limits government size. Like, this is my opinion. This is what I'm thinking. It keeps power out of bureaucrats' hands and puts it back where it belongs, with you, your family, and your community. That's how we honor God's design for economy and freedom. Let's talk taxes and healthcare through a kingdom lens. Because God's kingdom flows from the bottom up, our tax systems should too. So imagine this. Your municipality or province collects income tax from you, ne? Then not income tax, man. Our rates and whatnot for municipality and stuff like that. Ne? And then there is the real tax that the state takes. Ne? And then only for the responsibilities God intended it to have. If that was how it worked, the only collecting tax for the responsibilities God meant for them to have. That way, every level of government stays small, focused, and accountable. Ne? So unfair taxes come from unbiblical thinking. They're just another form of theft. I know, I'm opening a can of worms here, I know. But when you tax the wrong things, or you overreach, we breed corruption and waste. Healthcare is a perfect example. It shouldn't be run by a massive bureaucracy. Instead, let the free market work. Insurance companies competing, community groups, beyond just employers, offering plans, and every household carrying basic catastrophe coverage. It's a thought. It's a thought. Just think about it. Obviously, there's still a social element. It's still there. But government was never meant to be our parents. That's what I'm trying to say. So here is a thought. Now, people with serious pre-existing conditions could be placed in a separate government-funded pool. That means insurers stop worrying about who pays the cover. Premiums go down and more families get access. Costs fall, coverage grows, red tape shrinks, and the burden of everyday healthcare stays where it belongs, with individuals and their families. A lot of things are happening in our nation, the NHI and whatnot. And it's not just here in South Africa. Look at America, they're struggling with this thing. It's global. The Obamacare, the what, Medicare, Obamacare. Here we've got NHI. It's a serious issue. And we need to start thinking about these things a little bit differently. And of course, there will always be responsible people who work hard but still struggle. And for them, government steps in as a true safety net. High quality care funded out of compassion, not bureaucracy. So let's explore how charity, voluntary community initiatives, and targeted government support can work together, keeping freedom alive, family strong, and God's economy flourishing from the ground up. We need to talk about building for today and investing for tomorrow. Picture this. The Israelites are exiled in Babylon, and the false prophet tells them, don't worry, you'll be home in 2 years. That's Jeremiah 28. So they think, why bother with gardens or homes? But God sent a different message through Jeremiah. Build houses and live in them. Plant gardens and enjoy their produce. In other words, get to work where you are, because you'll be here for a while. Don't sit around waiting on handouts. Plant roots, buy property, start businesses, and plan ahead. Ownership, whether it's a home or a vineyard, means making an investment today for the rewards of tomorrow. Now, fast forward. Jesus tells a parable about the master who entrusts his servants with money before he goes away. He expects them to invest, to multiply what is given. And too many of us would have blown that cash on immediate pleasures and ended up with nothing. Here's the heart of it. God gives us resources not just to spend, but to grow them. Too often, we fall into the trap of instant gratification, racking up debt while ignoring his call to invest in our future. So tonight, I want us to delve into practical steps for smart saving, wise investing, and staying out of debt, so we can honor God with how we build today and what we live for tomorrow. Think about the old days. Before anyone could buy fancy seed packets at the store, a farmer who ate every grain would have nothing left to plant next season. He always set aside enough seed to sow again, so he'd harvest another crop. We are no different. If we want to live out kingdom economics, we must invest. And you know what? Our government should follow the same principle. And here's something else to remember. There's no such thing as equal outcomes. We all start with the same worth in God's eyes, but we are born with different gifts, different drive, and different circumstances. Some have more opportunity, some have less. That's reality. But here's the promise. We can all maximize what God has given us. We can plant wisely, steward faithfully, and watch resources grow, whether it's time, talent, or treasure. So tonight, I want us to dig into practical ways to invest, personally and nationally, so we fulfill our calling as faithful stewards and reflect God's abundance in every season. So here's a great example from Nehemiah chapter 11. After the city walls were backed up, Nehemiah challenged the people to invest in Jerusalem's future. He said the leaders stayed in the city, but the rest of you cast lots. 1 out of every 10 must move into Jerusalem, while 9 stayed in other towns. And everyone praised those who volunteered to live in the city. What was happening? People from the suburbs signed up to live inside the walls, to help rebuild homes, start shops, and bring order where there had only been chaos. By asking them to put skin in the game, Nehemiah lifted the whole community. Business sprouted, jobs appeared, and property values climbed. When we ban harmful practices like preferential treatment because of race, and encourage people to invest locally, we spark the same transformation. Neighborhoods become safer, opportunity knocks more often, and everyone wins. Imagine what could happen in our own towns if we embraced God's economic plan, each of us choosing to invest in our community's future. That's kingdom economics in action. And here's a thought. Government can and should offer real incentives for businesses to move into struggling neighborhoods. Why? Because when companies grow in these areas, they create jobs, support families, and breathe new life into communities. Scripture even tells us to pay special attention to the poor, the oppressed, and widows and orphans. But on the flip side, it's wrong for any government to choke off free trade or force its way into every transaction. That kind of control belongs to darkness, not to the light of God's kingdom. Now, I'm challenging the church to take kingdom economics seriously, and I want to challenge everyone. Maybe you grew up in a hard-pressed neighborhood, and today you're living comfortably in the suburbs. You've got a nice home, reliable cars, and a wardrobe that reflects your hard work. There's nothing to feel guilty about. If you've earned it, steward it well. But before we go further, I want us to pause and ask two important questions. Before we close this session, I want to leave you with two questions. First, has God's blessing on your life become a blessing to someone else? If not, you are missing the mark of kingdom economics, and what was meant to free you can become a prison. Deep debt, fractured relationships, and crushed reputations. Many of us are just one paycheck away from slipping back into hardship. Number two, you carry inner peace about your resources. When God provides, He always adds joy to our life. The blessing of the Lord makes rich and adds no sorrow. So it's time to align our personal and family finances with God's economic agenda. Our churches and communities must do the same, standing firmly on Scripture's authority. Remember that the earth is the Lord's. Let's live every day in the light of the truth. And here's the takeaway. God sees economic growth through His kingdom lens. If we align with this pattern, we'll catch His hand and transform our neighborhoods and restore our nation's strength. A properly functioning government, one that is rooted in economic agenda, does two things. It promotes fair trade, free fair trade, and it protects honest exchange. That means stamping out crooked gains in the marketplace. That's Exodus 18. So when you put God's money principles into practice, we unlock everyone's creativity and initiative. People get to use their earth's resources profitably and responsibly to bless themselves and those around them in a just, righteous, free economy. Even the poorest among us can tap into their gifts, maximize their potential, and thrive. That's work. That's kingdom economics at work. Empowering every life it touches. So here is the challenge. Here is the challenge. If this teaching shook you a little, that's good. The kingdom doesn't come to make us comfortable. It comes to make us fruitful. Drop a comment. What's one thing you need to shift in how you see money? And if you are ready to align your finances with God's kingdom, share this message. Someone in your world needs it. This is not just about economics, it's about freedom. And freedom begins with truth. Thank you for joining us tonight.